We want to welcome you all to a special edition of the AFB UK Leadership Talk to kick off Black History Month 2024. The AFB UK has a threefold mission to attract young people of all backgrounds into STEM, to ensure retention in the engineering sector by supporting university students through jobs, and through our bespoke career programs that address this gap. And finally, we aim to raise leaders. Our Leadership Talk series addresses that third leg of our mission by aiming to increase Black representation at the leadership level in the United Kingdom's engineering space and through our Transcend program so that professionals can aspire to become executive leaders in their fields, and also by hosting webinars such as these ones featuring successful leaders who have walked that path. My name is Opara, and I will be co-hosting today's talk with Iyke Onyegiri, who is the Secretary General of the AFB UK, and with the support of Abdul Aziz Bello, who will be monitoring the comments. So we encourage you to please put in any questions that you have in the comment box for them to be picked up later. Now, over the next hour, we have the great pleasure of speaking to an icon and a change maker, Tom Ilube CBE, as we delve into our theme of reclaiming narratives. Tom is a technology entrepreneur and educational philanthropist with an illustrious 30-year career in financial services and cybersecurity. A self-described startup guy with past roles at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Goldman Sachs, and the London Stock Exchange. He is currently the CEO of the cybersecurity firm Crossword Cybersecurity PLC and a founder of several startup technology businesses. His appointments include being a previous non-executive director of the BBC board, the current chair of the Rugby Football Union, and he was recently appointed as chair of the Prince's Trust in the UK. More than anything, he is a keen educational philanthropist who is extensively involved in launching and governing a number of schools, including being the founding chair of the Hammersmith Academy and also the founding chair of the African Gifted Foundation, amongst others. Welcome, Tom. We're so pleased and no doubt, as you can tell, excited to have you join us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. So, we're reclaiming narratives this month with Black History Month. And I suppose one of the early curiosities for us is finding out about who the young Tom wanted to be and what your formative experiences were.
Yes, well, actually, the young Tom wanted to be an underwater photographer. That's what I wanted to be. Back then, this is sort of 60s, there was a program on TV led by a chap called Jacques Cousteau, who it was almost the first person to be making basically underwater documentaries. And I thought, yeah, that's what I wanted to be. And then I discovered that water is really cold. So I thought, no, I'm not going to do that anymore after all. And then I wanted to be a research physicist. I became really interested in science and technology, and I was fascinated by physics, by quantum theory, by relativity, and so forth. So I actually did my degree in physics because I wanted to be a research physicist. But I quickly discovered, even though I was a smart guy, I met really, really smart people, and I could kind of tell the difference between someone like me who was quite good at maths and quite good at this, that, and the other. And then when you meet someone who is an absolute genius and you just think, my goodness, that's what it really takes to be a serious research physicist. So I decided that wasn't going to be me either. And so I went down the technology path, and I've been very happy with my career. But that is, and I've rarely told people that the very first thing I wanted to be was an underwater photographer.
That's so interesting. I mean, that's a part of technology, I suppose, that
Yeah.
our community hasn't really explored, but I'm sure you find a startup there somewhere.
there must be a black underwater photographer out there making documentaries under the seas that I just haven't come across
If
yet.
The Little Mermaid has taught us nothing, there is a life underneath there that we don't know yet about. But you certainly moved around. I mean, the young Tom that, we've heard a little bit about from your past interviews, you've certainly moved around a lot, by living in Nigeria and living in the United Kingdom, living in Uganda.
Yeah.
For your narrative, what did that mean?
Yeah. Yeah, so I grew up in London to start with, and my father, who was Nigerian, but he was in Britain at the time, he worked for the BBC many years ago, 50 years before I joined the board, which was fascinating, really. And sadly, he wasn't still alive to see me join the board, because it would have been lovely to
Full circle.
but that would have been quite special. But he ended up in the late 60s going to Uganda to help establish Uganda television. And he took me with him. So I lived there for 3 years. And it was the time when Idi Amin, the dictator, took over. So at one point, I found myself being tied up and nearly shot as a looter, which was a bit surprising, because we'd gone to visit a friend's house. And the friend wasn't there because the friend was Asian and all the Asians had left the country. And when we came out of the front of the house, there were a line of soldiers there and they tied us up and all the rest of it. But then they let us go. So that was, but it was around that time that my dad decided maybe we'd better leave the country. So we managed to get out through Kenya and then back to London. And then later on, when I was about 14, my dad took me over to Nigeria to finish my education over there. And to be honest, at the time, I didn't really want to go because I was a London boy and my hobbies were ice skating and rugby. And I was saying to my dad, oh, I can't go to Nigeria because, my big thing is ice skating. And he said, don't worry. Ice skating is very popular in Nigeria.
Say nothing.
I quickly learned that wasn't the case, and he just shook his head as if to say, "What an idiot! You really thought." Anyway, so I suppose that time for me was challenging, moving from school to school. I think I went to 5 different schools, so I was always the new boy coming into the class and having to get to know people. But I suppose it taught me about myself. It taught me about resilience. It was exciting to go to new countries. On the other hand, sometimes it was really sad. I remember when I came back to England, I didn't want to go anywhere. Other people were always going on holiday. But for me at the time, going to an airport was always associated with sadness because I was always leaving someone behind, leaving family behind, and so forth. And I had this sort of aversion to airports. So in my 20s, I really didn't travel much at all. I just stayed in England before I kind of got over that a bit. So it was an interesting time. And sometimes it was really difficult. I tried to run away once in Nigeria. Got
Exciting.
Yeah, exactly. I got all the way to the airport. I think I actually closed down Lagos Airport because I ran out onto the runway in the night, and then they couldn't let the planes land until they found me. And then after that, I spent 3 months in the village learning how to behave. So, so when I look back on it now, it was really sort of formative and interesting and character building. At the time, there were some difficult moments, to be sure.
It's fascinating, and that's definitely, it tells us a lot about how you have taken on the subject of fear and failure, which you talk about quite extensively. But now I'll just let Iyke take on the next question.
Yeah, hi Tom.
Hi.
Yeah, I mean, for someone like yourself who's got a pretty stellar career so far, could you maybe give us a bit of insight, to starting the UK first internet bank? And if you also want to just tell us a bit about your, Black British story. You've lived in various countries, but when you went into banking and starting your career, how would you say that has changed over the years?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been in business now and working life in the UK for 40 years. That was the point where you were supposed to say, 40 years, you look so young. That's very disappointing. Anyway, we'll carry on.
I'm still shocked.
I'll pretend you did. Yeah, 40 years really since I started my first job at British Airways so many, many years ago. And then I've worked at the London Stock Exchange, Pricewaterhouse, Goldman Sachs, and been in and around banking for a long time. And then at some point we set up the internet bank Iyke. I mean, it's been a fascinating journey. Obviously, things were different for Black British people back then. I've seen a lot of change over the years, over the decades. Things that were tolerated in the workplace 20, 30, 40 years ago are now definitely not tolerated. But that doesn't mean that they've completely gone away. Sometimes things that were more overt are a bit more hidden now. So you're dealing with racism, but you don't really know whether you're dealing with it or not because you can't quite see it. Whereas 30 years ago, it was very obvious. It didn't make it easier, but at least you knew what you were dealing with. I suppose my resilience growing up and my hunger to drive myself forward and build my career just gave me a lot of muscle. It was very difficult to stop me or put me off from moving forward when I encountered certain experiences. And then I had the great opportunity, along with a brilliant team of people that I was a part of, to create Iyke, the first major internet bank in the UK, really from a blank sheet of paper. A chap called Mike Harris was the had the founding idea for the company, and a group of us sat around and brought it to life. And I think what was really impressive there was the vision, to turn that vision into a reality and to see a major new bank that really launched a new industry come into being, and being at the heart of that was just a fascinating and tremendous thing to be part of.
And would you say within, say, the tech space, it's become more open over the years, especially for Black creatives and innovators?
I would say that it has. It has. So it's easier to get into than it was in the past, and it's easier to progress your career at the early stages. I think when you look higher up in organizations, you start to look at board level, you start to look at the C-suite, the very senior management. There's still quite a journey to go on. We still have to crack through that ceiling to start getting into the very senior positions. And that's both organizations need to think about how to develop their Black talent and bring them forward and sponsor people and provide allies and support. And we as individuals need to work out how to navigate the path up and through these organizations. And those of us that have managed to reach very senior levels in those organizations need to spend the time sharing tips, techniques, strategies that we've used in order to navigate that path, because it's not always obvious how to play it. Which battles do you fight? Which battles do you leave for later? How do you create allies? How do you get sponsors to support you? What's the difference between having a sponsor and a mentor? All of these things are things that need to be talked about in order to give us the tools to navigate our way through these organizations. Because what happens too often is that brilliant young people come into organizations. The first 10 years are amazing. You get into your early 30s, somehow you're not progressing at the same rate as other people in the organization. You don't quite know why. You don't quite know why that person got promoted, you didn't, and now that person got the pay rise. You get to sort of mid-late 30s and it becomes very frustrating, and you end up leaving corporate life and doing something else instead. And then the organizations say, where are all the Black people at the senior positions? That sort of middle marzipan layer of sort of middle management, upper middle management is a very tough layer to work your way through. And I think we can share more advice on how to do that.
I like that you say that, Tom, about sharing, especially the difficult lessons that have been learned along the way. Because first of all, I'm hoping it's okay to ask you
Yeah,
about a particular event that happened while you worked with the London Stock Exchange.
sure.
And even asking that question, I'm tempted to ask whether that's been the worst of it. So maybe first of all, if it's okay with you, I know you had a shocking experience in your first job at the LSC. Would you like to share it with us?
Sure. I mean, I will share it, although as we're talking here, we're talking about reclaiming
The narrative.
and so, even though that is an incident that I'll just mention that happened to me, it hasn't really got in the way of my journey. It's just, and yeah, I wouldn't say it's the worst thing that's happened. Yeah, I've in my career there have probably been maybe 20 to 30 very blatant racist incidents in my working life, and maybe 200 plus minor incidents. Often people think of I might experience one racist incident or I might experience, 10 small incidents or whatever. But what I say to people is, if you're at least of my generation, maybe it's changed now, but of my generation, developing my career through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, etc. Over my career, I've handled 20 to 30 significant racial incidents and maybe 200 plus minor racial incidents. And therefore, you become quite experienced in how to deal with different things, when to fight, when to leave it, etc. But you do have to have that resilience. And if someone goes through life thinking they're never going to experience it, and then they do, it can be really shocking, and they fall over. So, my experience at the London Stock Exchange, I just started my work there, and we went out for a drink at the end of the first week, and somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, I have friends of mine who would have you swinging from the nearest tree," and then they just walked away. And then you have to think, right, so how do you deal with that situation? Do you report it to HR? Do you challenge the person there and then? Do you let it pass? But as you get more experience, I mean, that's one of the things I think is that people often don't share, not so much share the experience, but share how they dealt with it. Because if someone had said to me before I started working there, look, you might face incidents like this, and if you do, then here's a way of dealing with it, then I'd have been prepared. But often we don't share that experience, and therefore the next generation have to try and figure it out for themselves
From
again.
scratch.
But for me, I am a tough, rugged fellow. You have to do. I grew up in London in the 60s and 70s. I spent time in Nigeria, etc., etc. You're going to have to do better than that if you really want to offend me and stop me doing what I want to do. This is reclaiming narratives. You can't stop me with something like that. That's not even going to scratch the surface. So if racists want to upset me, they really have to try harder than that.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's always the attempts. Every one of us on this call can speak to an example of such an attempt. But do you think that the Black professional, well, the perception of the Black professional, how do you see that as having changed over the years?
I mean, I think it is changing, and I think most of my career I have sort of operated below the radar screen, if you like. I just get on, do my thing, not much publicity, etc., etc. But I suppose in these sort of later years, I felt that it's quite important for me as a senior Black executive to just step out and be a bit more public about what I'm doing, because it shows people that it is possible, it is very possible in this society to rise to the top of organizations. I'm the first Black chair of a major sport in the UK, the sport of rugby, and I'm the chair of the Prince's Trust, and I've been, as you said, I've been on the board of the BBC and WPP, the world's largest advertising agency. So I've shown that as a Black British person living here, it is definitely possible to navigate your way to the top of British corporate society and into those rooms, and not just into those rooms, but to take the chair role. And I'm not an exceptional person. There are people on this call who are much smarter than me. There are people on this call who have much better degrees from much stronger universities that I went to. And therefore, it's sort of saying, if I can do it, then really anyone on this call can do it as well, if you have the resilience and the tactics and the luck and the opportunity and so forth. So I think, whereas when I was growing up 30, 40 years ago in my career, you would look upwards and see nobody at all. So I suppose that's the difference. You know, when I would look up 30, 40 years ago, there were no Black chairs of any major organizations. There were no people of color at the tops of any board. So maybe it was a bit more of a struggle then. Now, there are a number of us, not a huge number, but there are a number that just shows that it is possible.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I like how you described yourself as a tough person. You've kind of bashed your way through, and it's a good skill in certain scenarios, So from your own experience, you're a firm believer, in the fact that small changes can have a huge impact. And you've spoken about ripple effects in the past.
Yeah.
So what attitudes and behaviors do you feel like Black professionals can imbibe, especially when it comes to facing disappointments?
Yeah.
Especially disappointments that have to do with race, because most times this is where most people kind of throw in the towel, and it would be good to get your...
Yeah, absolutely. So when I say that I'm a tough person, what I probably really mean is that I'm very resilient, and in particular, when it comes to failure and rejection. And I think that is probably the key thing. Something in my mindset changed at some point where I started to see failure and rejection as a natural part of the process rather than as a blocker or a problem. I realized that the only route to being successful is through failure. And the only route to getting what you want and where you want to be, it involves rejection. There is no other way. I've never heard of a baby that stood up one day and just started running. That's not how it works. You stand up, you fall over. You stand up, you fall over. You stand up, you take 3 steps, you take 4 steps, you go, you go, you go. So the ability to stand up, try, fail, do it again, adjust, do it again, is just the way that the world works. And when I realized that, all of a sudden, the concept of failure shifted for me, and the concept of rejection shifted for me. So my first job, for example, was at British Airways. The reason why it was at British Airways is because British Airways begins with the letter B. Because when I wanted to start work and get into the computer industry in Britain in the early 80s, I applied to every single company that had a computer department that began with the letter A. And I finished all of them, and all of them rejected me, every single one. And then I started on the Bs, and I got to British Airways, and they said yes. Now, in my mind, in some people's minds at the time, they were saying, Tom, you're crazy. You've applied to hundreds of companies, hundreds. How can you take all those rejections and so forth? And I just shrugged my shoulders and said, there's a lot more. And when I finally got the job at British Airways, people were saying, wow, how did you do it? And I was saying, but I only needed to get to the letter B. I would have gone to Z, and then I would have come back again. I was ready to talk to every single company in the UK. I once applied to the same company 5 times, a strategy consulting firm. I applied to them, they said no. I said, okay, good, the lines of communication are open. So I applied again, they said no. I applied again. The 4th time I applied to them, they actually wrote to me and said, please call us. So I called them up, and the lady said, she was the head of European HR, I think. She said, look, Tom, you don't have the right background, you don't have the right qualifications, you don't have the right experience, we will never offer you a job. So I just waited 2 weeks and applied again. because I just don't care. I do not care. So, and I think sometimes what we do, and I see it a bit in the Black community, I can't speak for other communities, but we worry a bit about what other people might think. Oh, if I try and do this and I fail, how's it going to look? I don't care at all. It just means nothing to me. So I will apply and apply. And until I either get it or I find another way forwards. So I think that is really, really important. And then I think on the racism front, because I've experienced so much of it over the years, you know, big things, small things, silly looks, direct comments, etc. Again, it can't stop me. It just can't. So you do what you want, how you want, you say what you want, you imply this, that, and the other. It's not going to stop me. It just can't stop me. And actually, it makes the result even sweeter when I get it, when I get where I want to, and I know that I've had to step over some of those bits of racism and so forth. It's, you know, I don't mind. I will just keep going and going until I get there.
Yeah, and it's you know, I've heard you speak about the resilience that you had with applying for jobs, and I know that for a lot of people who are listening in, even members of the AFBE, because we cater to a community of professional migrants from countries where they had stellar careers and having to break through into the UK market, it's definitely one that resonates with them. However, at the base of a lot of the struggle, a lot of the even trying to fight through with resilience, there are certain realities. And I know that you sort of reference algorithmic bias, you know, the paying attention to the algorithm and understanding how to forecast the future and how these algorithms could work against certain communities. So how big of a problem is this? And you know, what can we do to not just prepare but also mitigate?
Yeah. So again, you know, we're talking here about reclaiming narratives, and I think the way that I look at it is that we have a wave of AI coming into our world now, being unleashed, you know, billions of pounds, dollars being spent on AI. And at the heart of these platforms are decisions being made, algorithms being fired up, being brought to life, and so forth. And if the people that create those algorithms and the data that they use codifies biases in society, then you shouldn't be surprised if the result of that is that the decisions end up being biased. And everybody can say, well, it wasn't me, it was nothing to do with me. The system said, you know, this is what you need, this is the result. The way to counter that is by getting involved. We have to be involved. We have to be in the rooms, building those platforms, you know, creating those algorithms, defining that data. If we sit on the sidelines and say other people are doing this, and then we complain in 2, 3, 5 years' time that these systems are making decisions that are against us in some way, then I will be saying, come on, you just can't sit on the sidelines and let that happen. You have to find your way into the room. Someone was saying to me, you know, would I be encouraging their child to be a banker or a lawyer or an accountant? You know, almost the traditional careers that immigrant families often think about, or second generation or third generation families often think about. And I'm saying, no, they're fine as careers, but you've got to get into the game, you've got to get into AI, you've got to think about what these tools and techniques will mean. And that is an area where we can be really smart and get right into the heart of it and make sure that the algorithms don't go in a direction that's difficult for us. So that's the way that I look at it. It's an opportunity, and at this stage, there aren't any experts. People are pretending to be experts in AI, or they're pontificating about this, that, and the other. But we are so early in this wave of AI that's coming into the market that there aren't any experts really. And because there aren't any experts, that means any of us can be an expert. Anyone on this call, if they said to themselves now, right, I am going to immerse myself in this new industry, in 2 years' time, you're going to be an expert. You will be one of the top 10% of people in this field. That opportunity is open to us. In other fields, right now, it isn't open to us because there are years and years of history. People have been lawyers for years, they've been doctors for years, etc. But in this new industry that's emerging, any person who is on this call could decide that they are going to be an absolute expert in their sector, in this new domain, and they should go for it. That's what will make the difference, and that's what, about changing the narrative. It's about, this is an opportunity for us. This resets the playing field. Let's get into it and make a difference.
Great, thanks, Tom. I like your angle in terms of how to further promote the Black professional. And my next question to you would be, when you look at the conversations as regards race and as regards having a more equitable society, what are those things that you feel we're not talking about? From your own perspective, what do you feel like we should be more focused on? Because nowadays, we do have a lot of conversations that, some make the headlines, some don't, but some can be distracting a bit. So what do you feel we need to be talking about?
I would say we need to be talking about how to make the practicalities and the tactics of how to make change happen. So I once described this set of conversations as the 3 C's. We talk about the challenges we face, and then sometimes we talk about the choices that we should make given those challenges. We rarely talk about how to make change happen. Challenges, choices, change. We don't spend enough time talking about how to make change happen. We spend a lot of time talking about, I've faced this challenge, or that person has faced that challenge. A lot of the effort, a lot of the conversation happens there. And what I would like to see us doing is shifting the conversation towards how we actually make change happen in particular organizations, in particular circumstances. What are the tactics? What are the techniques? If you want to make change happen in an organization like the military, it's very different to the way that you make change happen in an organization like the NHS that doesn't have a centralized command and control unit. It's very different that you make change happen in an organization like a bank that is driven by finance and results and money and so forth. So you have to understand the dynamics of the organization that you're in, and you have to say, how do you make things actually happen in that organization? Because it's going to be different to the others. Where is the power? Where are the allies? Where are the sponsors? Who do you need to influence? You have to look at it organization by organization and think about how to make change happen. So I would say it's about trying to find the shift from talking about the challenges and move that into how do we make change happen in this particular organization with this particular group of people. I'm quite conscious of time, so I'll try and keep my responses short. Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. And you know what? We've heard you talk about the butterfly effect in this particular context. I suppose my next question is going to focus on your philanthropy, because what do you think the ripple effects of the creation that you have done with your academy in Ghana, and what do you think that's going to have on the rest of Africa? And maybe in the same vein, just let us know a little bit about the African Gifted Foundation, and just
Yeah.
speak to what's been done there?
Absolutely. So I set up the school. It's now in its 8th year. It's called the African Science Academy. So the charity is the African Gifted Foundation, and we launched a school called the African Science Academy. It's an all-girls science and technology academy. It's based in Ghana, but it takes students from all across Africa. This year, our intake is from 13 different countries across the continent. We look for young women who are academically gifted and passionate about science and technology, but come from less privileged backgrounds and wouldn't be able to continue their education in this way without our support. We cover their fees completely. All of their fees and accommodation and travel and everything are completely covered. And they come to us and they do the Cambridge International A-level syllabus in maths, further maths and physics, but uniquely, I think uniquely across the continent, and I think almost uniquely around the world. I've maybe heard of one other school. They do those subjects, maths, further maths, physics A-levels, in 1 year instead of 2 years from a standing start. And last year, all of them passed. We got 100% pass in A to C's in maths, 100% pass in A to C's in further maths, 100% pass A to C's in physics in 1 year. It's the top performing school in Ghana. And then they go off to universities all over Africa and all over the world. We have students at Edinburgh University, we have students at Columbia in the States, at Brown at the University of Hong Kong, we've had a student in South Korea, in South Africa, all over the world, and they're all doing engineering, computer science, mathematics, and so forth. So my vision is that year after year, tens, hundreds of young women are coming through this program, are then going out to universities, are then working. You're basically building up a fascinating cohort of the most gifted young African women that you can imagine spreading out across the continent. Now, that is going to have an impact. The ripple effects of that in years to come is going to be profound. I tell them, in 10, 20 years' time, I'll be coming along on my walking stick, sort of struggling in, saying, how are you all doing?
You'll be motorized, Tom, in 10, 20 years from now.
There'll be 1,000 of them. There'll be several thousand of them who've all been through the Africa Science Academy, who've all gone off to universities, who are all working in industries all over the place and making a contribution to the continent. I don't know what impact that will have, but I do know that it will have an impact, and that's what I'm excited about. And that's the butterfly effect. When you do something small, but then it comes from chaos theory, the idea of chaos theory and complexity theory, the idea that a butterfly flapping its wings can cause a tornado on the other side of the world. So these young women, these butterflies flapping their wings by becoming brilliant young scientists will cause change across the continent of Africa. But how that change will happen and when it will come, I don't know, but I know that it will come, and I'm excited about that.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's great. Tom, just to pick on what you mentioned earlier about allyship, could you maybe quickly comment on, a time in your career where allyship really played an important role, where someone really stepped up for you to highlight your achievements, and maybe when you're saying that, if you could also tell us about one person who's had the most profound effect on your life. I know it's a tall order, but if you just tell us one person.
I mean, it is a tall order, and as I said, in my career, because there weren't many people like me, any people like me actually, in the early stages of my career, I suppose that in a way I had to look outside of almost of people that I knew, of real people. So, there are so many people that I could pick, and there are people from all sorts of backgrounds. But in this context, I mentioned my interest in physics, and an inspiration for me was a physicist called Richard Feynman. And he was a remarkable physicist, a Nobel Prize winner. Sadly, I never met him. I would have loved to have met him, but I didn't. But I read a lot of his work. I've watched a lot of what he's done. And what I love about his life and what he's done is that he was a brilliant physicist, but also he was a musician. He played the drums. He was a safecracker. He was an author. He was a lecturer. He was a comedian. I like the fact that he just loved life and did so many different things and excelled at them. And I think we often work in a way, and society tells us that we need to do one thing and we need to just focus on that one thing, and that's the way we can be successful. But what I enjoy now, for example, is that I run my technology companies, but I also chair a big sport, rugby. I'm involved in charity as chair of the Prince's Trust. I also set up schools. I sponsor an African science fiction literary award. That's another thing that I do. I do things that I find fascinating and interesting, and I don't mind mixing them up and doing multiple things. And that's why I always feel interested and energized. And I think it was seeing someone like Richard Feynman, who did amazing things in his career, but also did amazing things in completely different areas and didn't confine himself to one thing. That was a real inspiration for me and gave me a lot of permission, if you like, to do the things that I wanted to do in my life. I know we're down to the last few minutes.
We really are. And I'm just going to round off with one of the questions from the floor, actually a couple of questions. I'm going to roll into one, Tom. So we're reclaiming narratives.
Yeah.
You're speaking to your younger self. What advice would you give to that young professional Tom on how he can practically begin to change the landscape so that in the next decade, there are more Black people like him who begin to enter more executive roles? I know, tall order.
It's a really good question. It's a really good and full question. And I'm just wondering, if my wife was watching this now, she would be saying, more people like you. Oh my God, not more people like you.
A compliment if I ever heard one.
So, I mean, I love the changing narratives theme, because I had the pleasure a few years ago now of creating a coat of arms in the City of London. You know, you imagine, you know, when you see these fancy coat of arms that have been around for 1,000 years, and some of them have been around for 1,000 years, you always wonder, well, where do those coats of arms come from? And I can tell you where they come from. There's a place in the City of London called the College of Arms. And if you reach a certain status in your life and so forth, they might contact you and say, we'd like you to create a family coat of arms. And then you go and talk to them, and they show you these coats of arms that were created 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and so they have all of them there. And you sit down with a herald from the City of London and tell them your life story and what matters to you, and they create a coat of arms for you. And so we did that, I did that, and they created a coat of arms. And then one of the things you have to do is decide what the motto is going to be at the bottom of your coat of arms. And I decided that my motto, our family motto, would be derived from a saying that says, an African saying, an African proverb that says, until lions have their own storytellers, tales of the hunt will always favor the hunter. And I just love that. You know, until lions tell their own stories, tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So that says we've got to tell our own stories. And I boil that all the way down to your story, tua fabula. Tell your story in the way that you want to tell your story. And that's at the heart of these narratives. And so I would be saying to the young Tom at the start of his career, tell your story. And in order to tell an exciting story, you've got to live a life of stories. Nobody wants to read a story that says, I woke up one day, I went to work, then I went home, and then the next day I did the same thing, and 40 years later I retired. nobody's buying that story. So live a life full of stories. What is the joy? What is the tragedy? What is the excitement? What happened in your story to make it so exciting that you want to tell your story? So I would end really by saying, Tua Fabula, tell your story, reclaim your narrative.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, and we appreciate the time you've given to us today. We just want to all appreciate Tom's time on today's talk, and we will find reason to bring you back. That's all I can say, because you've got more stories to tell us, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll be saying goodbye to Tom at this point. But thank you all. We're not done yet. We've just had to let Tom leave for another appointment at the palace, no less. We do not take priority over the royal family as it is. I'm going to invite Oli, who is our co-chair of the AFB.
Hello. Can I just ask if you don't mind unmuting, because this is quite important for us to know. If you could describe that session in one word. I don't mind you unmuting and just let us know just one word that could describe what we have just experienced and what we just listened to.
Inspirational.
Fantastic.
Amazing.
Fantastic.
Empowering.
Yes. Any more?
Encouraging.
Come on, keep it going.
Motivating.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Pure admiration.
Someone said very enlightening. That's cheating. It's 2 words. That was amazing. That was amazing. And you know what? All through the year, we have, I couldn't help it, says Yewande. All through the year, we have amazing other speakers who come along and speak to Emma and speak to the guest host that she chooses for the event. And what they're here to do is inspire, because ultimately AFB UK is about 3 words. First one starts with A for attraction. The second is R for retention, and the third is P for progression. Ultimately, as an organization, our aim as an organization is to inspire young people of all backgrounds, with a special emphasis on people from minority ethnic backgrounds, to get into the STEM sector, to get into engineering. And over the last 17 years, we have seen many hundreds of stories of young people who have been inspired by the programs that we've run. The retention piece is important to us because between university and working life, there are a lot of people who drop out of the engineering profession, and we want to inspire more people to get into that profession. And the third piece is to do with career progression. And the reason that this program is set up, the reason why Emma is here and Iyke is here and Jacqueline leads this team, is because we know that there is still an underrepresentation of people of color at leadership level. And we want to reclaim the narrative that suggests that some of us aren't apt enough to become leaders. And that's why this program exists. So why am I telling you all of this? I'm telling you because we would like you to be part of our journey. AFB only exists because people like you spend their time to lend their wisdom and their knowledge to raising the next generation, to helping inspire people into jobs, and to help raise leaders. And so we're inviting you to do that. How can you be a member of AFBE? You just need to go onto our website. I believe there are some links we were going to share just now. You just need to go onto the AFB website, afbe.org.uk. And for £30 as a professional, you can be a member. And what that gives you access to is a network. It gives you access to mentors who can help you in your career. We have a structured mentoring program, also supported by GSK. What that gives you is access to a whole set of programs in which our 80 corporations, the 80 corporations that support us, including the likes of the BBC Scotland, BP, Harbour Energy, Amazon, so many other partners, can be part of your own journey. So all you need to do is go onto our website, go on to membership, and you can find out how to be a member. If you're a student, you get an even better deal, because for £10 for a whole year, you can be a member, and that means you get reduced ticket prices to some of the events that we run. It means you get access to a mentor. It means that you can basically be part of this journey. More importantly, it brings you into contact with people who can help. Most of us will not get the opportunity to talk to someone like Tom Ilube outside of these contexts, but I can get access to an Emma, to an Iyke, to people who are doing fantastic in their careers, and that's what AFBE gives you the chance to. The other thing I would like to tell you is that we have a number of social media channels. I believe that the Instagram page is going to be shared. If you want to know what programs we have coming up, then all you need to do is use the QR code to follow us. I believe there is an AFB UK page. I'm going to give you a bit of time to follow this, and we'll also go to the AFB UK Scotland page. So I'll just give you a minute to join us on the QR code, because what that gives you access to is all of the programs that AFB runs throughout the year, programs that can benefit your kids, programs that are there for you if you are a student, opportunities to volunteer, opportunities to mentor and be mentored, and opportunities to advance in your career. We have one of the most important products that AFB has to help people at this stage of their career is the Transcend course, which we've been running now for, we've had 2 cohorts of the course, but the actual preparation for this started in 2020. And the whole idea is to take senior technical professionals who are at that stage in their careers where they are thinking about moving beyond just being a competent engineer or competent professional, and they're thinking now about their careers moving forward. One of the ways of reclaiming your narrative is invest in yourself, and investing in yourself means coming onto a program like the Transcend program. Again, if you are interested in that, please drop us a line on info@afbe.org.uk, info@afbe.org.uk. You can find out more. You can go onto the website and do that as well. And then the other thing I will tell you, just as something to look forward to, is that we have already started planning for the AFB UK Gala and Awards. This is a biennial awards that happens always in Aberdeen, in the Granite City. And the last gala we had about 500 people who dialed in from all over the country, came in from, I'm so used to Zoom now, came in from all over the country to celebrate the talent that we have in the sector. So you can be a part of that. If you're interested in volunteering for that, you can send an email to afbawards@afbe.org.uk. So that's AFBE Awards at afbe.org.uk. And you can be a volunteer. You can encourage your company to be part of it and to come and support it. And there are other ways you can be part of it. But if you follow us on social media, you can find out more about that. And then the last thing I will share with you is in just a few days, I'm talking about the 10th of October. 10th of October, so we're talking about next Thursday, AFBE will be hosting a very important roundtable event in Birmingham. So it's the 10th of October, and what we will be doing is navigating the riots that happened, and talking about allyship in that context. You'd have heard Emma and Iyke asking Tom about this thing about allyship and what does that mean in a sort of practical and real way. Many of you will have ideas. Many of you will know how you would have liked to have been supported when the riots were happening. Well, the employers are there to listen. Why don't you come along and share with us? So there is a link. I'm hoping somebody will put that in the chat. There is a link to apply. You can do that on LinkedIn. It's in Birmingham. I believe it's a half-day event, and it's in the Arup office. Arup is another one of our partners. So there's so much that AFB has to offer, but I'll just leave you with those thoughts. Become a member. It's really cheap. It's £30. I spend less than that at KFC. So you can become a member. Okay, I'm not. Iyke says I shouldn't tell anyone that. Okay, you can become a student member. That's £10. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you where I spend £10. And you can follow us on social media. Follow our Instagram page. We have a main UK page. We have a lot of activity in Scotland as well, and we would like you to follow those pages. And I'd just like to end this by thanking the Transcend team. I want to name and shame a few people, so please join me and give them a round of applause. I'd like to name and shame or congratulate our leader, the leader of the Transcend leadership team, Jacqueline, who has worked tirelessly to make this happen. So please, guys, make her feel some love. So she's worked tirelessly to make this happen. I'd like to thank our fantastic host, Emma. All through the year, we have the privilege of listening to Emma interview leaders across the industry. She's got a very good way of getting to people's stories. So please, can you show us some love as well with your emojis and give her a round of applause. And another person that I usually think about when I'm thinking of who can I ask to do this is Iyke, because he seems to be one of these people that is like a stem cell. You can use him in any context. He usually performs. He's the postman who always delivers. So can we put our hands together for Iyke as well, being a great co-host today. And finally, last but not least, I want to thank all of the members of the leadership team, people who've been working in the background. Abdul, Patricia, who else haven't I mentioned? There are so many members of the team who've worked hard to make today possible. Can we put our hands together for them, please, and just thank them for their efforts? That's all I've got to say. Thank you very much. Sorry it was so long, but I had plenty to say.
No, this is all part of the story. This is all part of the narrative. So thank you so much, Ollie, for sharing the important information about what it takes to become part of the vision. As Tom has said to us, there is nothing more disappointing to ourselves than just living the day-to-day without trying to make something of our story. So as we come to the end of truly enlightening edition in celebration of Black History Month 2024, I encourage all of us, please think about ways that you can reclaim your own narrative, and more importantly, think about how you can imbibe your story into the vision of where it is that you see yourself as being able to excel to, or even just seeing your community being able to achieve just the new heights that we are striving for every day. I'll try not to wax too poetic. We've come to the end of this month's talk series. Please follow our LinkedIn page for information about our next talk series, which promises to be even more exciting, if you can imagine it. We hope that you all have a wonderful evening, and we'll bring this to a close. Thank you, Iyke. Thank you, Abdul. And thank you to everyone who has joined us today.